A client refused to pay, so I had some fun. When I have the time and come across interesting projects or clients, I take on one-off assignments to create websites, graphics, applications, etc. for said clients. I recently had a client for whom I created a website. Their old website looked like it was created in the early 90s, but it drew a lot of traffic, so the need to update was clear. Like always, we first agreed on the scope and design, and my client showcased his competitors' websites for me, explaining what kind of things he absolutely wanted for his site, but better, as he put it. I then had him sign a standard contract and pay a small upfront fee. Everything went smoothly, and I got to work. After the project finished, and I sent an invoice to my client, he told me that he won't be paying anymore. During the few days that I had worked, he had watched some YouTube videos about creating websites, and he had come to the realization that he, without any prior experience in web design or programming, could create an equally impressive site in pretty much the same time as I had, and so he didn't feel like he should pay me anything extra. I reminded him of our contract and he flat out said that I'm free to take him to court, but he won't be paying me. Obviously I had no intention of taking him to court because it would result in more headache than it'd be worth, but I wasn't just going to let this slide. The website was already live and teeming with visitors, but my client, although they were a newfound web design professional, hadn't realized that I was still the only one who had access to the site's backend, which meant that I could make any changes to the site and he couldn't do anything about it. So, I remembered how he had told me about all of his competitors' websites. I figured the appropriate response would be to write a script that replaces his company's contact details and opening hours with those of his competitors. Every time the site would load, the script would randomly show one of the competitors' contact details instead. I also made it so that the contact form requests would be sent to a randomly selected competitor's email. I chose not to inform my client of this and went on to enjoy my vacation. Within a week, I received several emails and a call about my client's concerns that something was wrong, that he hadn't received a new client through the site in almost a week, even though the site's visitor count is much higher than before, thanks to the new design and improved SEO that he hadn't yet paid for. I let him know what I had done, and I told him that I would undo it, but it would take me about an hour, for which I would be charging. Since I was on vacation, I'd apply the rush fee stated on the contract for that hour. And of course, I told him that this would all be added on top of the original fee that he owed me, plus interest for late payment. Naturally, this led to insults and threats being thrown in my direction, to which I calmly responded that I will begin work once I have the money on my account, and if he doesn't want to lose any more customers to his competitors, he'd best man up quick. He tried to call me immediately, and I just declined the call. After the second attempt to call me again, I sent him directly to voicemail. I received an express payment to my account the very next morning. Edit 1. Added details below about the legality of the situation that some have asked about. The client's old 90s styled website was running on a similarly outdated legacy hosting package. As such, I had convinced him to update his hosting provider in the process. So, I had paid for the hosting and set up the new site on that server. I did not touch the old site at any point. After I was done with the site, I showed it to the client, who was happy with it, and told me to redirect his domain to the new server. To do this, he gave me the login details to the site where he hosted his domain. I logged in, redirected the domain and logged out. Then, after it came clear that my client hadn't paid me and told me that they wouldn't pay me, all I did was modify the code that I had written that was on the server that I had set up, that the contract stated would be my property until the final payment was made. As my client didn't pay, I merely edited code that I owned on a server that I owned. He could have gone and redirected his domain back to his old server at any point, but even after his newfound web development expertise didn't know or care how to do, the only thing that was illegal was my client refusing to uphold the contract and pay me for the work that I had done for him. Edit 2. The contract had a clear section concerning rights and responsibilities of both parties, as well as clauses for what would happen in various scenarios such as work not being carried out, client not paying in time, client wanting to terminate the contract or client refusing to pay, and what constitutes as refusal to pay. Refusal to pay would mean that the rights and ownership are not transferred to the client, and that I may remove the site and any files and software I have associated to it, as well as modify the site as I see fit, such as replace the site with a simple under maintenance banner. Granted, I should have waited until the client had told me that they wouldn't pay me, or until I would have seen the payment, to redirect the domain for the client. Had I done that, none of this would have happened. When he told me that he wouldn't pay, I reminded him of the section and the clause in the contract, which he brushed off. After this, I wrote the scripts. Sure, I'm not proud of what I did, and I could have handled it better, but this lapse of judgment got the better of me, and while I'm not proud of what I did, I'm happy that I was paid what I was legally owed. CFO can't do math. Warning, includes math. A few years ago I worked for a tech company that was only just keeping its head above water. Most of the staff genuinely believed in the product line and did their best, but nothing was ever a standout success. Many ideas were put up to management, but often knocked back by the CFO, who we will call Karen, said it would be too expensive or wouldn't get a good return on investment, and many ideas we knew would never work somehow got approved, but never achieved anything. My team was working on a product enhancement we were absolutely convinced would be successful. We had a realistic budget. We had customer feedback showing this was needed and wanted, and firm offers to purchase, if it was available. We were convinced our numbers were watertight, and put them up to management. Next product meeting the following week and Karen shoots down every argument we put. Despite the customer feedback, she claims our numbers are wrong, and it will lose money. We simply can't understand this as we had been over them many times. We start going through the figures step by step, and she keeps telling us we are wrong. Out of frustration my manager goes to the whiteboard, yeah, we still have one, and walks everybody through the figures step by step. Almost everybody is doing the math themselves on their tablets/phones, or on good old-fashioned paper, and nodding in agreement. Except Karen, who is using a credit card sized calculator that came with her expensive leather binder and keeps saying we are wrong. My manager suddenly works out what might be happening and asks to have a look at Karen's calculator. He does a few basic calculations and his suspicion is correct. The cheap calculator does not follow the order of operations. Order of operations is a fundamental set of rules about which calculations to perform first in a mathematical expression. For example, 2 plus 3 asterisk 4 is read as 2 plus 3 asterisk 4, meaning you always do multiplication and division before addition and subtraction. So 2 plus 3 asterisk 4 equals 14. What Karen's cheap calculator was doing was all operations in the order they were entered, and reading 2 plus 3 asterisk 4 as 2 plus 3 asterisk 4 equals 20. So a room full of people with degrees in computer science, engineering and finance all agree the figures are right, except Karen, who is convinced we are wrong because her shitty calculator says so. She maintains we are wrong and our figures don't fit with her way of thinking. The revenge. At the end of each month, each team has to submit expenses reports. We are normally quite good at forecasting expenses, and any variation is usually something we need to buy at short notice. These are submitted to Karen for approval, who then authorizes adjustments in our budgets. Two engineers who are mathematical geniuses spend most of their coffee and lunch breaks for nearly a whole month madly scribbling down complex calculations. They suggest some very small variations to planned purchases. Bring a few items forward by a month, push a few items back a month, use a couple of different suppliers for multiples of the same items. Nothing unusual about this, as we have a range of ways to buy things at short notice from various suppliers. The whole thing is cost neutral overall, but it's a variation that needs to be approved. Then they prepare the expense report for the manager to submit Karen, who demands an explanation. The manager gleefully submits an itemized list of expenses for the month and the next month, and invites Karen to check the figures herself. Use your calculator, he says. The variation in expenses is very small when calculated properly, but comes out to millions of dollars if done the way Karen's shitty calculator does it. As I said, these engineers are mathematical geniuses. Karen isn't impressed by this and takes it to the CEO. She launches into a tirade about the engineers forging expense reports to embezzle millions from the company. She basically accuses the entire team of fraud. The CEO says he will look into it and comes to see my manager. This in itself is very unusual as the CEO very rarely leaves his office for things like this. If there are any problems you are usually summoned to see the CEO. The CEO isn't a bad guy, just really busy most of the time. We're watching the manager through the glass partition go through a lengthy explanation with the CEO, pointing out figures on the screen and writing on bits of paper. The CEO sits there in silence for a minute taking it all in, then suddenly bursts out laughing to the point of tears rolling down his cheeks. Then suddenly he's not laughing. He goes back to his office, and within a few hours there are a couple of auditors going through some of Karen's financial reports. There are glaring errors which they initially think might be signs of fraud or embezzlement, but eventually they put it down to Karen's shitty calculator. Not fraud, just incompetence. Karen is summoned to the CEO's office. We don't know exactly what is being said, but we can hear the CEO shouting. He never shouts. The result is Karen gets fired, despite still maintaining she is right and everybody else is wrong. She has just 1 hour to pack up her desk and leave. She is finally escorted out of the building. When she gets to her car there is a piece of paper taped to the windshield. It is a picture of Stephen Hawking with the words "You must be at least this smart to invent your own branch of mathematics."